Прологом о звездной мечте начинаем мы этот рассказ. Там, в небесной глубине, человек Земли стал первым человеком космоса. Одно небо над всеми нами, один у нас дом, наша планета. И для всех нас, людей Земли, свершаются подвиги в небе. Первый космонавт, брат ваш, он такой же, как ты. Он твой соотечественник. Но и ты гордишься им, и ты. Пусть мы по-разному живем и по-разному думаем. Пусть небо представляется ему не таким, каким видит она. Пусть свои любимые города у каждого из нас, свои поиски прекрасного, свои мечты. Но есть мечты всего человечества, о мире и счастье для всех. О том, что наши дети полетят к звездам с планеты, забывшей о войнах, насилии, угнетении. Летать к звездам, познавать тайны Вселенной. Это ли не одно из величайших дел человека? Сегодня мы лишь видим далекие миры. Завтра мы будем там. Звездная мечта человечества. Может, ее знал Вавилон, уже тысячелетия лежащий в развалинах. Здесь с высоты башен постигался светил небесных ход. Первые звездные карты Египта, ровесники пирамид. Несчетные века пронеслись с тех пор, и мысль человека устремилась за пределы Земли. Жюль Верн увлек свое поколение идеей заманчивой и наивной. Из пушки на Луну. Но в старом фильме «Аэлита», снятом вскоре после гражданской войны и разрухи, мы мечтали уже о ракете. Именно о ракете. О том, что она унесет советского человека первым в космос. Четверть века назад нам казалось, что звездная наша мечта осуществится, может быть, вот так. Все последние годы мы жили предчувствием великого космического полета. Мы спрашивали у себя, скоро ли? Когда же? Когда? И вот свершилось.
Говорит Москва. Работают все радиостанции Советского Союза.
Сегодня здесь радиокомментаторы со всего света.
Et maintenant, le cosmonaut Gagarin est à Moscou et dans un instant, il va rencontrer...
只有在你们的国家里，才能实现宇宙飞行的一个英雄加加林。祝贺你，苏联人民！祝贺你们！
Major Jurij Gagarin is in Moscow. He is approaching the stands where Nikita Khrushchev is officially.
Et maintenant, le cosmonaut Gagarin est à Moscou et dans un instant, il va rencontrer...
Товарищ первый секретарь Центрального комитета Коммунистической партии Советского Союза, председатель Совета министров СССР, рад доложить вам, что задание Центрального комитета Коммунистической партии и Советского правительства выполнено. Первый в мире космический полет совершен на советском космическом корабле «Восток» в 12 апреля 1961 года. Все системы и оборудование корабля работали четко и безупречно. Самочувствие отличное. Готов выполнить любое новое задание нашей партии и правительства. Майор Гагарин.
Раскрывай объятия столицы. Первая наша ракета с жидкостным двигателем взлетела в 1933 году. Это уже история. Но и он стал историей, первый наш спутник, которым мы встречали семилетку. Он был разведчиком пути в космос для человека. Второй унес бесконечно далеко от Земли живое существо. Лайка. Несколько дней радиосигналы передавали биение ее сердца. Она жила вне Земли, но тогда еще не был возможен возврат оттуда. Летающая лаборатория третьего спутника сообщила о важных открытиях в мире космических лучей и метеоритных потоков. Конструкторская мысль заглядывала далеко вперед. От спутников Земли к космическим ракетам, спутникам Солнца, космическим кораблям. Конечно, не только здесь плавили металл, и ни одна автоматическая линия превращала его в нужные детали. Индустрия семилетки приняла заказ на небесные тела. Машины, способные непостижимо быстро обрабатывать донесения электронного мозга мчащихся ракет, принимать решения и передавать в космос команды, помогли сделать эти тела управляемыми. Земля училась защищать будущих звездоплавателей и от опасных излучений. Космос и мир атомов? Да. Возле советского синхрофазотрона спокойно работают ученые. А ведь в нем разгоняют протоны до энергии в миллиарды электрон-вольт, свойственной некоторым частицам первичных космических излучений. Объединенный фронт науки и техники готовил новое наступление. И вот помчались к Луне многоступенчатые ракеты. Впервые были достигнуты скорости, нужные для межпланетных полетов. Лунник унес вечной спутнице Земли первый подарок — советский вымпел. Автоматическая межпланетная станция с фототелевизионной и радиотехнической аппаратурой сфотографировала невидимую сторону Луны и передала снимки Земле. Именно в те дни, когда Луна открыла свою извечную тайну, служивший на северной границе летчик Гагарин подал рапорт. Он попал в поток писем и заявлений. Космосом болели уже не сотни, тысячи. Начался отбор. Прежде всего, идеальное здоровье. Выясняет приспособляемость организма к любым условиям. Сосредоточенное внимание, упражнения на быстроту и точность. Он решает задачу, и в те секунды, когда глаз ищет нужные цифры, магнитофон подсказывает совсем другие.
11, 9, 7,
17, 12, 9, 7,
21, 15, 10,
11, 13, 18, 23.
11, 9, 5, 7.
Кто не любит качели? Но когда качание затягивается, нет, он, кажется, не полетит. Шлем с датчиками. Они передают приборам малейшие изменения в организме человека. На этот раз его трясут в виброкресле. Ведь при взлете и наборе скорости корабля тоже будет вибрация. Барокамера. Из барокамеры начинает выкачивать воздух. Создают условия, как при подъеме в стратосферу. От датчиков к приборам-самописцам. Выше. Выше. Ритм сердца. Все труднее дышать. Почти 14 километров. Спуск! Быстро! О том, что происходило дальше, расскажет нам этот дневник. Из самых здоровых отобраны идеально здоровые. Гагарин. Так тренирует, пожалуй, лишь спортсменов-многоборцев перед спартакиадой. Они должны безупречно управлять своим телом в пространстве. Они должны приземляться и приводняться с искусством мастеров парашютного спорта.
Long before man had mastered the earth, he lifted up his eyes and began to dream of conquering space. Through the centuries, he nursed the dream, until today the dream has substance. Man has crossed the threshold, the first great frontier of the universe. Man has entered space. And what kind of a man? Moscow, the capital of his country, waiting to give him a hero's welcome, has no doubt. Nor indeed has the rest of the world. A great man, a brave man, one of the mighty pioneers of history, Major Jurij Gagarin, walking alone to meet the praise, the honors, the acclamation. And yet the truly great thing about him is that he is an ordinary man. Husband and father, foundry worker turned soldier. Until yesterday, unknown among millions. In the first man to enter space, there is something of each of us. He shared our dream, and in making it come true, he represented us all. In formal terms, he reports to Nikita Khrushchev that he has carried out his assignment. He says, the first space flight has been carried out in the Soviet spaceship Vostok on April the 12th, 1961. The spaceship and its equipment functioned perfectly. I am in good physical condition and ready to undertake any further assignment that may be entrusted to me. The words, those of a soldier reporting to his CO. The meaning, a new chapter in the history of the world. For today, Jurij Gagarin is not allowed to be an ordinary man. For today, he belongs to Moscow. And the people of Moscow give him a foretaste of the welcome he'll be getting in other cities and in other lands.
Дорогие товарищи, дорогие друзья, граждане всего мира, я обращаюсь к вам.
Khrushchev speaks to the vast crowds in Red Square, but he addresses his words to the whole world, announcing with pride that for the first time in history, a human being from the planet Earth has made a flight into space.
На корабле, созданном руками советских ученых, рабочих, техников и инженеров, вырвался в космические выси и совершил...
A Soviet citizen, in a ship designed and built by Soviet scientists and engineers.
Мы гордимся подвигом Юрия Гагарина.
We are proud of Major Gagarin's exploit, he says, and of the efforts of the scientists, the technicians, the workers who made this flight possible. At this moment, we look back on the history of our country and remember its achievements. We remember, for example, the scientist Kibalshish, who dreamed of a flight to the stars. Kibalshish lived at the end of the 19th century. He was imprisoned in the Peter and Paul fortress in St. Petersburg, and on the wall of his cell he drew a picture of a spaceship as he visualized it, and was confident that man would eventually build rockets that would take him to the stars. In the little town of Kaluga, another scientist calculated the first trajectories of rocket flights into space.
будут изучать его, раскрывать и дальше...
The spaceship Vostok, Khrushchev says, is our herald to outer space. It follows our Sputniks and space probes.
Миру. Гений Ленина освещает наш путь.
The work will go on. More of our pilots will follow the trail that has now been blazed. They will continue probing the mysteries of nature. On this same Red Square, Lenin attended the first celebrations of the new state. Over this square flew Yuri Gagarin's predecessors, the pioneers of their time. The first assaults on the stratosphere achieved heights of 12 or 13 miles. Planes penetrated far into the Arctic and helped explore the ice floes around the North Pole. Pilots flew to the United States and were given a great welcome there. Only natural, perhaps, that the first man in space should be a pilot.
Я обыкновенный русский человек. Таких у нас в Союзе очень много.
Who is Yuri Gagarin? I'm an ordinary person, he says, like thousands of other young people. I was born near Smolensk.
В земле, в Жатском районе, на Смоленщине.
This is the country where Gagarin was born, the country around Smolensk. When the war came, Yuri Gagarin was only 7 years old. The family moved from their ruined village. Life was grim in those days. The son of a farmer, Yuri decided to go to a vocational school where he trained as a foundry worker. From there, he went on to an industrial school on the Volga. Here, childhood dreams drew him to a flying club, just like this boy. He, too, was probably very excited when he went on his first flight. And then he knew. This was his calling. From the flying club, Gagarin went on to the Air Force School at Oranienburg. His instructor is now probably teaching many future Gagarins. In 1957, Gagarin graduated from the school with honors. That was the year of Sputnik 1.
После запуска первого спутника
After the launching of the first Sputnik, he says, I too had the dream of becoming a space pilot. I hoped that someday I would fly in a spaceship. I think this has been my dream ever since.
С тех пор и заболел этой космической болезнью.
The first liquid fuel rocket went up in the Soviet Union in 1958. That is history. Sputnik 1 is also history. Sputnik 2 carried a living being, the dog Laika, into space. For several days, radio signals reported on the dog's breathing and heartbeats. At that time, a flight of this type was still a no-return trip. Then Sputnik 3 gave information on meteorites in outer space, on radiation. Designers were looking far ahead, to rockets that might one day fly beyond the boundaries of the solar system, and industry was already beginning to work on some of these projects. Machines capable of incredibly fast calculations, decisions, and communications made it possible to control flights beyond the atmosphere. At the same time, people on Earth were learning how to provide the shielding from radiation essential for human flights in space. The Soviet proton cyclotron. Here, too, scientists worked on problems of radiation. Here, protons are accelerated to energies of billions of electron volts, the energies of cosmic particles. Science and engineering were working together for a new attack on space. The multi-stage rockets set off for the moon. For the first time in human history, the escape velocity needed for interplanetary travel was reached. The first human gift to the moon went off on its journey. An automatic interplanetary station with radio and television equipment took pictures of the far side of the moon and transmitted these pictures to Earth. This meant it was possible to produce a map of the far side of the moon. It was at that time that Gagarin was asking to be trained as a space pilot. There were thousands of such applications coming in, so a lot of selection was needed. The primary requirement is, of course, excellent health. The adaptability of the organism to diverse conditions, to a changing environment, is another essential requirement. The ability to concentrate, to think fast, is essential too. Problems have to be solved in seconds. Candidates are tested against a background of confusing figures coming from a loudspeaker. and they must be able to concentrate despite this interference.
17, 12, 9, 7,
11, 13, 18, 23.
11, 9, 5, 7, 1.
34, 30, 29.
The swings may be pleasant for a few minutes, but when the swinging lasts for hours, no, this man won't make a space pilot. A special helmet transmits the slightest reactions of the brain to recorders. Vibration is another factor during the boost stage of a flight. Barometric changes, too. The conditions inside are similar to those of an ascent into the stratosphere. While every change is recorded, the simulated altitude keeps increasing. A rhythm of the heartbeats. An altitude of 14 kilometers, about 9 miles. Gradually, the breathing becomes labored. Quick. Now the descent. And here's a film record of the actual training of the shortlisted candidates, the fittest of the fit, among them Jurij Gagarin. First, they have to become fitter still. Then the studying, astronomy, geophysics, rocketry. The Earth is mankind's cradle, but no one can remain in his cradle forever. Again, the barometric chamber. The trained space pilot must not fear complete isolation, even in the absence of all communication with the Earth. After many weeks of isolation, the same world again. And this slim young fellow will be weighing 1/4 of a ton very shortly. Even more, for as a rocket builds up its tremendous speed, a space pilot suffers enormous acceleration forces. Centrifugal training prepares a space pilot for this sort of thing. Blood becomes like mercury. Veins feel as heavy as though they're filled with lead. The opposite condition, weightlessness, arises as soon as the spaceship is in orbit. A fantastic condition. It can be simulated in an aircraft, but only for brief periods at a time. Finally, a meeting with Air Chief Marshal Vershinin. August 1960, just before the launching of the predecessor of the Vostok. This spaceship carried delicate instruments to register cosmic radiation. Many samples of the fauna and flora of the Earth were taken aboard. More passengers, mice. Detailed information about their life aboard the spaceship was to be telemetered to Earth. You'll probably remember these two, Belka and Stroker. They were trained for about a year to stand up to acceleration forces, to receive their food from automatic feeders. This was the Noah's Ark of biology. went into orbit for a flight of nearly 500,000 miles. A space pilot could have gone aboard that spaceship too, but one more checkup was needed. 17 circuits were made by the spaceship before the container returned to Earth, landing exactly in the pre-arranged spot. And the passengers, quite unhurt. At the press conference, journalists learned that this experiment was a complete success and had made a human flight a matter of the near future. And the man who would make that flight did not yet know that he would be the chosen one, a very ordinary human being. He would leave home for the place where the final preparations for the flight were being made. Again, there would be centrifugal training. Soon, the day would come when he or one of his friends would make the history-making flight. The American scientists and engineers had been going all out to overtake Soviet scientists in their work. American scientists had done a great deal in launching small satellites. They have carried out many interesting experiments with animals. The rocket with the chimpanzee did not make a complete orbit around the Earth. It went up, and the capsule then descended in the ocean. It carried out roughly the same kind of flight, which was later to be made by one of these young men, the American astronauts who are being trained for the Mercury project.
Space Administration's manned satellite program. Identified publicly for the first time, all family men, they've gone through the most rigorous selection program ever devised. In 1961, perhaps, one of them will be first in space.
But the first man in space was to be someone else. All were ready, but one had to be chosen. Here is Gagarin facing the State Commission. Nobody had any doubt about the success of the flight.
Не сомневаюсь. Разрешите, товарищи, мне заверить наше советское правительство, нашу коммунистическую партию и весь советский народ в том, что я с честью оправдаю доверенное мне задание.
I assure the Soviet government and the entire Soviet people that I will live up to their trust and will blaze the first trail into outer space, he promises.